guys, so today I want to talk about fingerings. This is going to be mostly aimed at composers just because it's mostly about like what do you need to give us, how do you need to lay it out, that kind of stuff. But I think it's also going to be helpful for flutists just so you know what resources are available, you have a better idea of how to read them, what you should ask composers for, and also how to help guide composers to find some of these things. Because it is on us to help give resources to composers because we know them better. A lot of us only play flute and we're focused on flute. So while composers are writing for tons of different instruments and they might not necessarily know flute as well, we do, and it's, I think, our responsibility to help share that information. Hence why this entire channel exists. I think the first place to start is what things do you need to give fingerings for? This isn't universal. I think every flute player will have a different opinion on this. I think the thing that everyone will agree on is please give us multiphonic fingerings. Please. Just please. They're so difficult to find if we don't have a fingering to begin with, and while that fingering might not always be accurate, at least we know that you tried and you looked it up in an actual resource. That means that this multiphonic exists on someone's instrument. This is also a big thing where like multiphonics don't always exist on our instruments because of acoustics and the way they're built, but at least this way we know that it's possible for someone and that you found it from somewhere. You didn't just make it up and hope that we could do it, kind of thing. Keep in mind also that natural versus artificial multiphonics will have very different fingerings, and it's still important to give us the fingering for the natural multiphonics, even though it is just a traditional fingering. It's just a good reminder to us that like this is a natural multiphonic and this is going to be harder to play, and also this is the bass pitch that it's created from, so this is the fingering that you need. It's just a courtesy to us, like courtesy accidentals kind of thing. But I think it's also a really good thing to get in the habit of is just every multiphonic that you put into a piece, give a fingering. Specific altered pitches where you want a very, very specific sound, you do also have to give a fingering for. We can't just make that up. I think quarter tones, like traditional quarter tones, you can leave out. Those are pretty standard fingerings, and there's a lot of resources that we use that we can find our fingerings from. And sometimes also the fingerings can clutter the passage, especially if it's a very quarter tone heavy piece. So that's a hit or miss thing. That's something that you might want to ask the performer that's going to premiere it. But personally, I don't mind not having quarter tone fingerings. So, where do you find these fingerings? There's 1.5 million resources, and there's some really amazing ones online and also in print. Everyone knows Robert Dick's book, The Other Flute. I think Flute Colors is an incredible resource, and he's done an incredible job curating those fingerings and having them really laid out really well. So really, I recommend Flute Colors the most for anyone looking for multiphonic fingerings. I also think that in terms of legibility, his system of coding all of his fingerings is really good. So if you want to use that system, that's also a great idea. What I really do recommend you stay away from is virtual flute. While it's a really cool thing and it can be really helpful for finding very specific microtones and things like that, it also is very, very difficult to figure out which ones are actually viable. If you have a flutist in the room and you can test them, then yeah, go ahead, but be very wary with that specific resource just because it can kind of get away from you really quickly. There's a lot of fingerings on there that are just not possible in context, and there's a lot of fingerings that don't work as well as they say they do, kind of thing. It gives you every single possibility on flute, which, while being super cool, is not always the best thing. It might be a little bit of overkill, a little bit of too much information. It can lead to it not working out. I think that because Robert Dick and Flute Colors have been play tested and they've been used in context by a flutist, those are the really good resources. There's 1,000 more that I'm sure are excellent. Please let me know what you guys use because I'm really interested to see what else there is out there. But I think those two are a really, really good place to start. The next thing, and I kind of mentioned this just now, is the fingering system that you're using to code in the piece. I think Flute Colors is probably the best right now. It's very, very visual and it just uses shaded keys to indicate whether they're down or up or half held. And while it is pretty intuitive, I would definitely recommend having like the key in the fret matter just so that the flutist has no chance of messing it up. My personal favorite system is actually the one that Takemitsu and Fernihau use, which uses numbers for all of the levers that aren't in the body of the flute. I know it's not as intuitive for a lot of people, it's just the way I learned it and I like that the best. So if I'm writing in a fingering into my part, I'm going to use that system. That one you definitely need to give the key for, just because if you don't know what the numbers mean, you have no chance of figuring out what's going on. You might be able to figure it out because the numbers are placed about where they are on the flute in terms of like where they are in the key scheme, but it's still not nearly as easy to read if you don't know what you're doing. I think basically the long and the short of it is whatever system you use and whatever like key system that you use to put the fingerings in, please give us a key in the front matter just to like remove any issues. And the last thing is something that I don't think a lot of people know about or realize, and that's that there are certain fingering charts that are built for quarter tone system flutes. I can talk about the specific maker for Eons because I think she's incredible, but Ava Kingma built this system of quarter tone low flutes and then also collaborated with Brannon to do the same thing with the C flute. And if you've seen Kingma system flutes, that's what this is. Basically, she created this system of rings and levers that adds ability to half hold on the big flutes and also just kind of facilitates quarter tone playing a little bit more. That being said, those fingering charts are very specific to those flutes. And if you're working with someone who doesn't have that kind of flute, they're not gonna work. The fingerings just aren't going to be effective because we don't have the levers and the keys that they're asking us to use. The system itself allows you to vent and half hold and do all these things that just don't work on the big flutes, especially when you don't have that system. While on C flute, you can still half hold even without the like added bonus of the Kingma system. On alto, you really can't unless you have one. Just be aware that sometimes you'll find resources for the Kingma quarter tone flute, and those are very limited to performers that have a Kingma system flute. Yeah, I hope this was helpful. If you guys liked it, give it a like. If you're new here, subscribe. If you want to support me more, check out my Patreon, and I'll see you guys next week.